Yeah, I can't beatbox. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Differently Wired Show, episode 10, the big 1. Oh, I can't. Wow. We've done an episode of this once every week for the last 10 weeks. I'm surprised that I've actually been able to demonstrate that level of commitment. Hope you're paying attention, ladies. I know it's not that impressive, but come on, give me a break. Anyway, I'm just talking out of my ass. Anyways, before we get into the main stuff today, I gotta obviously introduce my co-host. He is the wise, the archetype of the wise man, as Carl Jung would probably say. I'm basically just trying to say he does all the work here. John Tucker. John, what's going on?
I'm having a great time getting ready for our show
Awesome. Good. And yeah,
and thinking of myself as wise. That's even greater.
well, you are wise, honestly, because I look back on all the stuff that I do for this show. I tend to be kind of the clown that makes all the jokes, and you tend to make all the important insight. But then again, I'm just a dumbass 25-year-old millennial with delusions of grandeur. But it seems that we tend to be helping people, so let's try and keep that trend going, shall we? And I haven't
Absolutely.
stopped them. I haven't stopped the music. Hopefully, nobody was able to hear anything. Uh, uh, anyways, also before we get into the main topic and the mailbag and all the usual stuff that you guys are used to, I gotta just mention that the show's not going to go as long as it usually does. We're not going to have a call-in segment today. The only reason why is just because John has an emergency client that he has to get to. That client has been very understanding, saying they'll be happy to wait for a few minutes while we just get all the stuff out of the way. Because we know you guys show up and look forward to this every single week, so we're glad to try and be there for you, even if it's not for as long as you're used to. But we'll be back to our regular scheduled programming starting next week with the same length of the show with the call-in segment and Twitter questions and all that. And finally, obviously, I just got to do the usual stuff. Facebook, we got a Facebook page. Go like it. Go interact with us. We're nice people. We try to help you. And if you want, just send us a message there. We're doing a pretty good job staying on top of the messages there. People seem to be pretty happy as well. Discord. I think we're almost up at 250 members. The community is still going strong. People are very happy so far. If you want to chat with people that are differently wired and might have some advice to give you in respect to your circumstances, that you should probably go there, especially because the experiences of people that have AS tend to mirror those of other people's experiences quite frighteningly from time to time. So, yeah, just go check that out. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go into the main topic of today's show. I can't. Oh, yeah, you suggested this to me, John, because we were talking about it the other
Hmm.
day. The main topic is helpful tips for parents. Now, I'm going to sort of let John take the lead on this one for a little bit because obviously, his experience as a coach has involved, trying to get across to parents what it is that is unique about their kids and what they need to understand in order to help them to succeed. Now, John, in your time with parents, what are some of the patterns that you've seen in regards to the behavior of parents, positive or negative, that you want to bring up and see if maybe some people who are listening right now might might relate?
Sure. Well, one of the main things that seems to be a problem for family relationships is parents think some of the things their children are doing are like deliberate. They're deliberately not remembering things. They're deliberately being obdurate or angry or obstructionist. You know, so parents will sort of get a little bit angry and testy about it. So what happens is they'll say, "Well, are you going to do that thing or not?" And you will say, "Well, yes, I am." You don't talk to me like that, and then everything goes south because the energy around the communication is kind of negative. So if when parents are talking, they could treat each conversation as a conversation of itself rather than a continuation of a tormenting, unhappy conversation, it would be way better. Because what tends to happen if you're differently wired, when people are hard on you, mean to you, it shuts you down or it makes you very angry. So sometimes you'll get a 12-year-old kid, he's in school, and the teacher says, "You didn't do this." Yes, I did. No, you didn't. You're being ODD. Now you're objecting to what I'm saying. This is defiant. So you're a defiant kid. So you'll get these junior high kids who give all kinds of nasty labels simply because it was assumed they meant nasty when all they did was forget something or misinterpret something small. So it's really good as a parent to step back from the emotional entanglement of Johnny not doing the snow or taking out the garbage last night when you told him 3 weeks ago that he was supposed to take out the garbage last night and he went ahead and played video games and didn't take out the garbage. So you're upset because he did all this stuff. So it's around communication. So the energy around communications has this kind of effect to either make people feel free to talk or shut stuff down. So, what will tend to happen when a person has been in a family for 15 years? They learn, oh, smart thing for me to do is say what mom needs to hear.
Mm.
So, you're 12 years old. You come home from school. Junior, did you do your homework? Yeah, I got it done. When did you do your homework? I did it on the bus. You don't take the bus. Well, I did it. It goes on and on. Because if you have ADHD or Asperger, you might lie, uh, even though the lie will be uncovered in 14 nanoseconds,
Mm.
because you just need to say what it is to make the painful conversation go away. Now you lied about your homework. Now mom's got you. Oh, you ate the apple pie too, didn't you? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The conversations go south. So if you want to be in a loving relationship as a parent, then the key word I think is a respectful relationship.
Mm.
This infant child, this young person, this 37-year-old occupying my basement, whoever they are, they're a real person, flesh and blood, and they deserve respect.
Yes.
That's weird, I know, but they deserve respect. So if you treat them with respect, now I don't mean mawning, fawning, that kind of obsequious. I don't mean that. I just mean give them the opportunity to answer a question and don't ask them too many questions because it makes them crazy. Don't be accusing them of stuff because that's insulting and irritating and naggy, and it will not yield the kind of conversation you want. So if conversations start with a gracious gentleness, then there's a much better chance that they will go well because the person won't have to lie to say stuff as a parent you think you need to hear or they think you need to hear. So essentially, it's a way of communicating. Now, if anybody is actually interested in pursuing this a little more, Ross Greene has written a book called The Explosive Child, where he talks about this at great length about how you can unravel this stuff. And he talks about collaboration, cooperation, rather than being the big boss. Um, an older guy, the late Marshall Rosenberg, much older, the late Marshall Rosenberg wrote a book called Nonviolent Communication. And in Nonviolent Communication, NVC for short, he talks about how you can explain what you want in a gracious way, where you accept responsibility for your feelings, but you don't attack people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate you, you didn't take out the garbage. You can say you didn't take out the garbage because it's a problem, but you can say it in a non-aggressive, non-violent way. Like when you took out the garbage, fell over, the house burnt down because something, something, something. Whatever the problem was, you can state it, but it doesn't have to be all that dramatic. It doesn't have to be all that accusatory, because no matter what the offense was, if you put it in that attack mode, then your son or daughter are going to have to respond in a defense. This will make you angry. Then the thing will escalate. So a lot of the tips for parents hover around how you talk to one, how you talk to your husband and wife, how you talk to your children, and everybody gets their fair share of time in the sun. I don't mean to go on and on about this, but I see it so often where parents think, oh, I must be a good parent. I must remind them that they're deficient. and they've been deficient a long time, and it looks like they're going to be deficient for a really long time. This isn't good for people's sense of self-esteem or self-efficacy. So we need to get off of that kind of negative slide and kind of stop, step back, and say, what communication can I use with my son, daughter, which actually is useful, that lands well, that helps them rise to the occasion, that supports their becoming, I don't know, grown up and responsible for themselves, and not to feel constantly as though they're under threat.
Hmm.
So that's kind of my initial feeling about it. It's about how you talk to one.
Uh, First of all, sorry, I just had to address something that people are bringing up in the chat. It's just apparently there's a bit of a connection problem going on with Discord. You're sounding semi audible, John. You sound no semi audible doesn't sound correct because it sounds like your volume is low. No, it sounds like the technical aspects of the show are causing you to sound robotic at times. Hopefully that'll go away if I just talk. If it's just me talking for a minute, I don't know if I sound robotic to you. Do I sound okay?
You sound regular to me, but maybe if I talk in a more stilted way, it'll be better.
No, no, it's not like that. It's just it's the nature of Discord, unfortunately. Even though it is the best option for people that tend to do streaming,
Okay.
it tends to do that every once in a while. I'm just putting my volume up a little bit. So first of all, in respect to the examples that you gave about, kids forgetting to take out the trash or not doing the snow, but they suddenly just go upstairs and play video games. Um, that's kind of true for me. Not so much the going upstairs to play video games, but the thing is, um, because the brains of people that have AS tend to be so convoluted with all the different things that are running through our minds at once, you sort of have to take different things one step at a time. And usually, the way that we discriminate against the various things that are going through our mind is in regards to how important those things are to us. So, for example, in respect to taking out the trash, I've never. It's no problem. It's no hassle for me to take out the trash. It takes less than a minute for me to do, right? But I'd always constantly forget it, and it always annoy my parents because they're like, "Oh God, well you got to remember how to do this. It's your responsibility. I can't keep doing this to you. I can't keep nagging you." And it's like, well, why not? Right? I know it's annoying to you, but I can't really help the fact that these various things continue to slip my mind. Like sometimes, depending on how cluttered my brain is on a particular day, I actually have no problem remembering how to take out the trash or doing my various responsibilities, and it's fine. Everything's jovial. But then some days I feel like my inner being is in a state of chaos, and I'm doing everything I can to keep myself from falling off the edge, and then something could happen where my parents. This is when I was younger. This is maybe like almost 10 years ago when this sort of thing was happening. Um, I would be on edge just trying to maintain all these things that are going through my brain at once, remembering like that I have certain responsibilities to do without completely forgetting them, but also trying to do them one step at a time without completely melting down. And then my parents would come in and be like, "Hey, why didn't you do the trash? I told you twice already. Go and do it." And then I feel like I'm going to punch him in the face because I'm so tired of just trying to keep my myself from going into a meltdown.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I completely understand that frame of mind, and it's something that I wish we could get across to parents more succinctly. Um, but it just seems that it's endemic to human beings in general that whenever something doesn't go their way, they have to assume malintent
Hmm.
on somebody
Hmm.
else's part. And I just wondering why that is and how you can possibly overcome that.
Well, it's a lot easier to just simply assume malintent. You got somebody to blame and you've solved the problem right away. It's not as easy as sitting down and saying, Jimmy, how can we make it so that when we work together, it works for you? How can I support you in whatever it is I want you to do to get done something, something? Like, is it a little sign in your door? Is it this? Is it like, let's brainstorm. If you really need Jimmy to remember the trash, set up a system, that he agrees to. Now, I don't mean force a contract that he signs, grumbling. I mean, work out stuff that helps him do whatever that is. So, for instance, I'll give you a silly example. You're trying to get your life in order. You're trying to go to the gym in the morning. You've got a plan to go to the gym in the morning. Well, when you get up, it's not time to go and find out that your gym bag is full of dirty socks that have been there for a month and all that stuff. Really, it's the night before. So when you get up in the morning, in your doorway, there's a gym bag ready to go. So you don't have to face all that overwhelming, where is this, where is that? How come I didn't buy this Nike trousers I wanted or whatever? So it's like laying out little stuff like that. And parents can work on laying out things that do work and help, like the family can work together on this instead of what you're talking about of how come I told you to do this, why didn't you do it? The why you didn't do it isn't actually a question. You understand? It's not a question. It's an attack. Why didn't you do the trash? That's not a question
Hmm.
because the answer to that question attack won't generate a satisfactory response. Well, I was playing a video game. Who the hell are you to be playing video games when you attack? Well, I forgot. Well, you should have remembered because you know what I mean? So that attack is just simply an escalation of you're a failure.
Hmm.
You didn't take out the trash, so you're never going to get you'll never have a satisfactory whatever because you can't and what parents will often do with these kinds of questions is they say, you're so irresponsible. This is another example of how irresponsible and inconsiderate you are.
Hmm. And it makes you
Right?
resentful because you know that's
Of
not the
course.
case. But the fact of the matter
That's
is,
right.
because you're already trying to stop yourself from becoming livid. You
Yeah.
can't really. It's difficult for you to be able to stand up for yourself. This is the case for me, almost for my entire life, except for the last maybe year or two. Like when my parents were demeaning me, I just sort of had to metaphorically leave my body and just wait for them to finish talking, and then I'd have to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's too bad. One thing, as we're talking about this, I'm sort of coming to a bit of an epiphany about something that I could recommend to parents. Um, and it's sort of worked for me. I've sort of unintentionally put this sort of ethic into practice in my own life. Look, as I would just finish saying, a constant state of mind for people who have AS, or even for people that just have mental health problems, is that they're trying to keep their brain from going into overload, right?
Hmm.
And anything that's a sort of deliverance from that, where they can convince people that their existence isn't a nuisance, but that they can be productive and bring joy and utility to their own life and to the lives of other people, making them be seen as responsible and beneficial. That's great. That's a godsend for people like me and anybody else that has AS or mental health problems. So once you get across to parents, for example, that the kid really wants to make them proud. They all they want to do is stop this mental storm from happening. If you can set up a system where they can fulfill their responsibilities and at the same time take that load of pressure off of their brain, then once that's streamlined, they will not only be productive, but they'll be far more productive than most kids. At least that's what I've found in my own personal life, and especially with the people that I've talked to over the past year or so, whether it's in my video comment sections or on my Discord, is that once that antagonism dissipates between parents and there's an understanding there that certain things are out of their control, but if you just do one or two small things that they can actually be very productive and very helpful, then it's so much better. Honestly, the last 2 years of my life, particularly the last year ever since I started doing these videos, have been so much easier and so much less stressful now that I have just that little bit of understanding. And as a result, my parents that are particularly proud of me for doing YouTube and being helpful to people. Because now that I have that understanding, they lay off of me. They let me tackle my responsibilities as I see them in terms of importance, and because of that, I'm able to help them when they need me, and I'm able to help myself and move forward when I need to. So hopefully that will encourage parents to sort of lay off their kids a little bit, and hopefully make them realize that for the most part, not in every single case. I mean, sometimes kids just like to be immature and they don't accept responsibility, and that's true. But you can't assume that that's the case for every single situation. And once you stop doing that, uh, just just give it a try. You don't have to just assume that for every single situation, but just give it a try once or twice, and you might be surprised at the positive results that you see.
There is an element of self-fulfilling prophecy in that I want to draw attention to, and that is if you assume badly and bad intent of your kid, you will create that bad intent.
Mm.
But let us say your kid is a bit lazy today, is avoiding work, is being a bit naughty. Okay, you caught him at it. Is he thankful that you caught him? No. He's resentful and angry. If you make the mistake of assuming he has good intent, he then has room to make the intent good because he hasn't been attacked about it. So if you're going to make a mistake in human relations, make a mistake on the side of graciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you more room to maneuver later. Another thing you said caught my attention is now you folks are accepting you said my responsibilities, which means not their responsibilities for you, but yours. In other words, that is a deepening of respect where you decide what it is you as a person are doing in your life. This is your responsibility, yours that you chose. So this makes perfect sense. And that is, and there's a third point that comes up with this, and that is when parents are locked in a debate that's been 14 years long, they should stop and say, this strategy of nagging and screaming so far has not worked. Perhaps I could explore one that would work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a lot easier said than done, but it seems like
Oh,
people
yeah,
tend to take the route of insanity, repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Like with that,
all the time.
yeah, like with
Oh,
that one example of that one guy that you were telling me about before we started the stream with his wife, but I don't want to
yeah.
get John into trouble in case we go into more detail. Listen, we're almost at the half-hour mark. I did say that we have to keep the show a little bit short, so unfortunately we're gonna have to move on. But this is a pretty broad topic, so we'll definitely come back to it in a future episode. There's so many different things that we can communicate to parents and try to help them with.
Hmm.
Before we get into the mailbag segment, I made a promise to somebody who sent in a Twitter question last week that I would respond to it this week. This comes to us from a guy named Jeffrey Bloom. He said, okay, I just scored 40 out of 50 on the autism screen. This is in reference to a test that I recommend on my Truth About Asperger's series of videos, where you could take this thing called the Autism Spectrum Quotient, and depending on what score you get, if it's above, I believe, 28, you're 80% or higher in terms of likeliness to have AS. So he just scored 40, so that it's a pretty good indicator that he might have it. He said, I'm a 44-year-old guy and struggle most of my life. There doesn't seem to be anyone available for treatment and diagnosis where I live. Also played video games into a near divorce. Advice or help needed. Well, first of all, I would have to know where it is that you live. Because once I know that, I could probably do a better job in respect to offering you specific resources. Um,
I
just give
can
me,
jump in
yeah,
there
yeah,
if you
please,
like.
yeah.
Okay. There are a couple of resources that are not dependent on where you live. One is the ACO, the ADHD Coaches Organization. If you think you could use the benefit of an ADHD coach, you can look up there and there's a directory. Another Other one, a bigger resource, is Psychology Today Therapists Online, and that is worldwide. And these folks are geographically based, but quite often, both the coaches from the other group and coaches and therapists and psychologists and the like from Psychology Today will coach and talk to people online. I actually located, I won't say his name because I haven't got his permission, but I located the other a year or so ago a psychiatrist from Toronto who will diagnose on the telephone people who are a long ways away
Mm-hmm.
and help them a long ways away. So nowadays, more and more people are using distance. So that won't stop you. You could be on a fjord somewhere. You could be in Iqaluit. You could be, in the Pacific. And if you can get online, you can go to those two specifically. Now, there's other resources for sure, but those are the therapists and the people who are frontline dealing with the questions you're after. And they can hook you up with other people that are in their network. So you can do this all online.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, John. I'm sorry that I couldn't do much more to help in this respect. I'm pretty sure, Jeffrey, that you're in my Discord. So if you want to continue this conversation more, feel free to DM me at any time. So, that out of the way, let's move on to the mailbag segment of the show. Now, how do you get a mailbag question on the show? Well, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is go to whatever email website that you use and use this email that you see on screen right now, which is maxdarrett@yahoo.ca. Every week we go and pick out some of the questions that you guys. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Every week we go into the mailbag, pick out some of the questions that you guys have sent us, and let you guys direct the show from here. Also, if you want to have questions, don't do this for this particular show because, like I said, we're ending this early. But if you want to have a question discussed live on the air, like you could submit a question just a few minutes later, we'll read it out. Use the Twitter. Use Twitter and use the hashtag differentlywired, which you see on screen right now. Although sometimes, because of the volume of questions or the amount of time that we have, we're not able to get to the Twitter questions. So if you want to guarantee that your question gets asked, make sure asked, use the super chat function that you see in the chat below. With that out of the way, let's get on to the very first question. And this question comes to us from K. Chris. And K. Chris writes, hold on, let me just highlight everything here. Okay. Hi, Max. I discovered your channel about a month ago, and the more I watched, the surer I became that I had Asperger's. I was already fairly certain to begin with. When I was in elementary school, I'm in high school now, I didn't get along with the other kids at all and would have tantrums where I would scream and hit my head. I felt overwhelmed by the amount of work, at least in the earlier grades. By grade 7, I found everything very easy. At least I think it was a social worker. I met with a lot of people at that time. Hold on, did I arrange this correctly? I think it did. Okay, at least I think it was a social worker. I met with a lot of people at that time. Years later, my mother told me that just a couple of weeks later, the social worker said she wanted to reconsider. For whatever reason, my status quo obsessed mother never took me back. I never knew what to make of this and just interpreted it as meaning I'm borderline Asperger's syndrome. Then I took the autism spectrum quotient test, the one I just referenced, after finding your channel and scored very highly. Currently, I have a lot of very strict and vigorous schedules, and I'm constantly experimenting with small changes to make my day go smoother. In fact, things are going so well that I'm starting to doubt if I actually have autism. I hear the symptoms you mentioned in your videos and relate to all of them, but then I hear of the struggles and relate to none. I'm beginning to think that maybe the symptoms were just the nocebo effect or a bias in my memory. Or maybe I am autistic and it's just my schedule keeping me from realizing it. If this is true, maybe my current schedule and entire way of going about things are unstable and I will fall back into the depression and tantrums of my younger years. Will I be able to manage university life or a PhD program? I think maybe a diagnosis would allow me to know if it is me who has changed or just my schedule. In case you're wondering about the system for getting a diagnosis where I live in Ontario and am 15. I have some very strange symptoms that stand out to me and don't seem to match anything typical of Asperger's syndrome. After something that I was very worried about passes, I laugh, but it's not a natural laugh. It seems forced even to me, but I'm not forcing myself to do it, and I am completely unable to control it. I think it may be nihilism related. I realized the only way to get through my depression was by accepting that the universe was meaningless, but also accepting that that doesn't mean I shouldn't be happy. Nothing may matter, but dopamine still feels good, so I should carry on. I don't quite know what I'm laughing at. Maybe it's the fact that I was very stressed. Maybe it's the absurdity of everything. I love physics, but you have to admit the field is ridiculous. Things just exist, the laws just are, and there's no explanation. I also experience depersonalization around once a month. It usually happens when I'm in a social situation and don't know what's going on. The Wikipedia article describes it as disturbing, but I find it the most common experience in the world. It feels like nothing matters, but in a good way. As if life is a chess game and I don't care about winning, I just want to try my best. I no longer feel like me, I feel like a brain that just happens to be piloting a body. So, is it worth seeking a diagnosis? If I am diagnosed, what should I do to ensure that my entire system is stable? I'd love to hear your opinion, but also understand that you're very busy. Congrats on finding a new place. Thanks, Doc. If this email seems poorly thought out or insignificant, it's because I thought if I didn't contact you now, I might lose my chances. Your channel seems to be growing rapidly. Congrats again. Best wishes, Cameron. Um, well, first of all, John, I'm going to pass this off to you first. But before I do that, I just want to repeat while I'm very grateful for the heartfelt and thought out messages that I receive in my email inbox, and I do read all of them, despite how long they might be, I have to encourage people that do write in emails to us to try and keep the emails relatively short, like less, maybe 500 words or less. That way, it's just, it doesn't take up as much time reading them, and we can sort of help you a whole lot faster. You know what I mean? So, John, do you have anything to say in respect to
Yeah,
this?
I'm very impressed by the articulate email
Mm.
Cameron has sent us. There's no question in my mind that he belongs in a PhD program, and he obviously can manage it. There is no reason to worry about slipping back because he has this ability to detach, which is kind of mindful. It's like mindful meditation kind of ability. It's called depersonalization in the books, but he's managed to make it something where he can stand back, look at himself. This is a very sophisticated thing. Not only that, but his concepts are sophisticated. His language is very sophisticated. And I laughed. I really laughed out loud when I first read the note about physics being a ridiculous idea. That is very insightful because he likes it, understands it, and yet sees the absurdity of things. It's a sophisticated email, well thought out, well done. Um, oh, but the meat of the question is, should I get a diagnosis? Yeah, you're 15 in Ontario. Yes, you should get a diagnosis. I'll tell you.
Yes.
If you have um, any ability to get an OSAP loan, getting a diagnosis will allow you to access the bursary for students with disability through OSAP. And this is true for all the Canada student loan supported programs across the country. They're differently administered in Canada. Now, people that are not in Canada should be a little jealous about this. But what it amounts to is that if you're a Canadian student with a recognized disability, such as ADHD or Asperger's syndrome, or you're on the spectrum somewhere, you can get a fair bit of support through this bursary for students with disability, BSWD. Uh, all you need, though, is a real diagnosis. You can't say, oh, I have trouble learning. Give me. No, it doesn't work quite like that. You do need the diagnosis to take it to your post secondary institution. The other thing about that is you're only 15. You don't need to rush and get your diagnosis because you really want, when you go to post secondary, to have a reasonably fresh diagnosis that's within 2 years
Mm-hmm.
of entering school. So if you get it now, it might be a little stale. So you kind of can wait a while, but you can operate from the point of view that you certainly have Asperger's like symptoms, and it's quite likely you have it, but it doesn't stop you from doing the PhD stuff. I have Asperger's clients who have medical degrees, law degrees, PhDs, and so on. The kind of brain you have has almost no bearing on how intelligent you are. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. A lot of my clients are very, very clever, very smart, and can certainly manage a PhD program, especially if the supports are put in place through the Student Accessibility Center of whatever institution you decide to go to.
Yeah. And one other thing, well, actually, a couple things. In respect to the fact that you're 15 and you live in Ontario, that's kind of good because at the age of 18, that's tends to be the point where a lot of the services for autism tend to dwindle. So you still have a few years where you can get some really sufficient help in regards to setting up your future and obviously getting a diagnosis and uh, sort of preparing you for the tribulations that come along with post-secondary life. Although, like John said, based on the way that you sort of described yourself and the way that your email was formulated, it sounds like you're a pretty smart guy, and you'll do fine if you just sort of maybe take one or two elements of our advice. And also, in respect to you saying that you identify with the symptoms but not necessarily with the struggles, look, it really depends on the circumstances of your life, because the fact of the matter is, um, I've had, you're born with AS and you have these symptoms from the get go, right? Um, but they don't necessarily manifest all the time. See, when I grew up, I was thankfully, I was pretty privileged in some respects. So even though these symptoms did come up, nobody pointed out my eccentricities, and they never got in the way where they became a serious problem. So it never really amounted to much struggle until, let's say, when I was about halfway into being 16 years old, right? So if I don't know if that's the case for you. It just don't take my advice to heart. Just think about it for a little bit. And don't let it dissuade you from believing that you have AS, because based on what you tell me, it's a pretty good guess on my part that you probably do, and you should probably seek out a diagnosis. Okay, got to wrap this up in just a second. We're going to do one more mailbag question, and then we got to go. So this one comes to us from... Oh, well, first of all, thanks so much again for sending that in, K. Chris. The next one comes to us from Elaine Scott, and Elaine Scott writes... Hi, Max. Thank you for producing your differently wired YouTube videos and the game analyses. Well, thank you so much for sending in your email, Elaine. I have a couple of questions about video games on which I would love to hear your opinion. I am not a gamer myself. Why do you think first-person shooter games are so popular? Do you think new types of games could be developed in order to help differently wired people learn and practice new skills that might help them out in the real world? I'm thinking that it would be good to develop a game that gave people a sense of social justice in a constructive way, rather than in a destructive way. It would need strong story, which you have identified in your video game analyses. Do you and John think such a project would be useful and worthwhile? I already have a couple of ideas for the game and a title, Edge of Chaos. Oh, that's a pretty good title. First of all, why are first-person shooter games so popular? Well, considering that's probably my favorite genre, let me just think about this for a second. Well, it's relatively easy to pick up. There's not really much to it. Especially if you play the campaigns for games like Call of Duty. All you really need to know are the three buttons. The left stick is to move, the right stick is to aim, and the right trigger is to shoot. And it's the most basic but effective way of trying to put the player in, like, to give the player a power fantasy, right? What gives somebody more of a thrill than wielding something that could kill another living being, regardless if it's in the form of a game or in the form of real life. You get the point. And also just the idea that you could be so powerful that you can take down so many enemies and come out and be revered by your peers, whether it's in like real life war and the war of a video game, regardless if you're playing like Halo or Metro or Call of Duty or whatever. That might be the reason why. It's as for me, yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons, but not the main reason. Normally when I play games like Halo or when I used to play Destiny, it's the feeling of like believing that you're actually skilled, because when you can get like a here's a bit of gamer lingo that John won't get, a 360 no scope from across the map, you feel pretty good about yourself, like it's a very difficult shot to make, and if you can do that sort of thing consistently, then it makes you feel like if you keep doing this sort of stuff, you'll rise above the rest of the people that play those types of games and have a better experience. Now, as for developing games that give people a sense of social justice, It's a bit tricky there because depending on your political leanings, you run the risk of being preachy. There's ways of doing stories where you're not constantly being preached to about political messages and doing things that are really on the nose, but you could also do things that really invite people to discover the humanity of people that are differently wired. So, for example, I wonder if I'm able to talk about this. Okay, I gotta have to dance around this a little bit. I'm doing a series of videos in the future where I talk about autistic characters in media. And the best characters are ones where the fact that they have these quirks, it's not, it's just, it's a trait. And it's not the most important thing about them, right? And you're not constantly being batted over the head about how important it is to, uh, include these people and to embrace diversity and stuff like that. But if you can find a way to do a story about somebody who is differently wired, um, and sort of show people that we're not really that much different in a lot of respects, and help other people to see our common humanity, that might be a good way of doing it. And hell, video games, it's a relatively nascent medium. There's a lot of different ways that we can tell stories in video games that haven't really been attempted yet, especially with things like virtual reality, and especially virtual reality, because in the future that's going to be a mechanism that is used to teach a lot of people, not just for like, I don't know, army exercises, which is something that the army has been doing for a long time, even before VR became something that consumers could buy, like in Force 21 trials and stuff like that. It might be used in schools one day. People can go on field trips and experience the world in that way, as if they're standing on the top of Mount Everest or something like that. And if you can use that type of technology and use it in a way to sort of educate people in regards to what it's like to be differently wired, what our struggles are, and but also realize how important we are to the development of the world and how important our talents are, if you can utilize them correctly, then absolutely. John, I know you're not as high on the video game thing, but do you have anything to add to that?
No, except that you're going in a great direction. The idea of shutting down technology or shutting down video games or turning off the web is all crazy. The bell is rung, it's done. So why not use this technology to do a lot of other things? Why not use it to make projects that do something besides kill people? That's a great idea. I love it. In fact, I forget what they're called now. There are a couple of companies developing video games to help people with ADHD, for instance. So it's not as though nobody's thought of it, but there's not nearly enough of it done, taking advantage of the power of these media to put people closely in touch with a story and feel as though it's real, even though it's virtual. So I think it's a fabulous idea, Lane. I would go for it.
Absolutely. So, sorry about this, guys, but we're going to have to cut the show here. John really needs to go. Thank you so much for sticking around, John.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but before we go, I just got to do the usual house cleaning. Hold on, let me just. Is there something that I can bring up while I'm doing this? Here, I'll just put the chat over the screen. Thank you so much, guys. Craw, Stacy, Alina, Emerald, Nasoi, Stacy, Peter, for hanging around with us as we do the show. We really appreciate the way that you make our shows a whole lot more lively. I do watch you guys commenting, and even though I'm not able to respond readily, I really do appreciate your participation. Before we finish, if you guys could please just hit that like button. Please, you have no idea how much it helps us and the channel overall. It just tells YouTube algorithm that our content is worth watching, and the more likes it gets, it passes our content around in people's recommended feeds, which is really where people get views nowadays. Like, for example, the most recent video that I did on the video game Metal Gear Solid, I can't tell you how many people came to my channel saying this was in my recommended feed and I'm so glad that it brought me here. Well, think about it this way. If you hit the like button, this video might be put in the recommended feed as somebody who really needs it, somebody who has AS or is suffering with mental health problems. They can come to us and we can develop a future rapport with them where we can provide them advice and resources that they might desperately need. So please hit that like button. And also, if you want to support this channel beyond that, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do it financially. There is a PayPal link in the description box below, although I understand that not everybody has money, especially if you tend to have medical issues and you come here and you're already spending your money on that. So if you want, the most important thing that you guys can do to help us is by taking this video and sharing it with somebody. If you have a Twitter profile, just put it in your Twitter your profile. Put it in your Twitter. Just send it out. That's one of the most helpful things that you guys can do for us. Honestly, it's helped me so much in the past month or two. We've been doing this for the last 10 weeks. And in that time, I've gained over 10,000 subscribers. So if you guys can continue to do that, that would be, well, obviously be great for me because, boost my ego and all that. But it just obviously because we want to try and get our messages out there and help as many people as we can. So with that all out of the way, I just want to thank John again, as always, for helping me with this.
You're welcome.
For those who couldn't hear what he said, "You're welcome." He just came out a bit sounding like RoboCop, which is
There I am.
cool, I guess. Just don't say "come with me if you want to live." Oh no, wait, that's Terminator. What the hell does RoboCop say? Anyways, we'll see you guys next Wednesday with the full show back again in the comments, the call-in segment. And until that time, stay yellow.